Welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, the show for real estate investors who are looking to scale.
Hey everyone, welcome back into CG, the podcast where real estate investors come to grow and scale their business. How lucky am I? Every single week, I get to talk to one of our members that is growing and scaling their businesses. And I get to learn about their journey, where they started from and where they are today. I've got a lot of these to do. We do these every single week. We call it Weekly Conversations with a Genius. I've got over 450 of them. So I've got a lot of conversations to have, but I couldn't be more excited to have this conversation today with longtime CG member and my fellow CG leadership team member, now has graduated to our CG CEO leadership team. Please welcome in my good friend, Mr. Marck de Latour. Welcome, my friend.
Good to see you, mate. How are you?
I am well. You look great for someone that just got off a plane from New Zealand yesterday. So hopefully you've got, and you don't do coffee, but you have caffeinated beverages that you like, right?
I'm an energy drink guy, but you'd be surprised to know I didn't have one today. So I'm just pure energy right now. So no, all good. Always love getting back home. And I'm always reminded by my wife, she kind of understands that Christmas can be a hard time for me, not being around the family in New Zealand and just seeing all of the pics on the social feeds that come through and obviously videos from the family. So she's like, hey, you're only 2 flights away. Just jump on a plane. So she always encouraged me. And this was a bit more impromptu, but yeah, really enjoyed getting down to see my family.
Yeah, I know that during COVID, that was tough for you to get into New Zealand, your home country. And we didn't waste any time getting right into that you're not from here originally. And the accent would have given it away for sure, especially when you called me mate instead of whatever else Americans call each other. But this is why I love, real estate. This is why I love our community, because we have so many people with diverse backgrounds. And these conversations that I have on a weekly basis with this podcast since we've launched it, I've learned so much more than I ever knew about our members and all of these that I've done so far. So, you're not in New Zealand. You're not doing real estate in New Zealand. So let's start there. The weekly conversation, usually we start off with what market are you in? What's your niche? And then obviously we'll go back in the history. But let's start with where you're at and what it is that you do and what type of volume are you running in your market?
Sure. So we are based in Kansas City. Our company, SBD Housing, runs a real estate brokerage. But we have traditionally been a turnkey model, buying distressed homes and then remodeling them and selling them to our investor base. We can talk through how we pivoted, but that's obviously changed over the years. Currently, we're still doing new construction. We're building just duplexes and fourplexes locally here. On a very small scale, maybe 40 to 60 units a year, nothing crazy. And then we obviously buy and sell and wholesale a couple hundred homes every year, which is probably, our core business.
So diversified, I'm guessing you didn't start that way. We'll get to that in a bit. But, I think, Mark, you and I have talked about this before. People that are interested in real estate or going full-time in real estate or currently in real estate, everyone has a different story. And I think from a podcast standpoint, we talk a lot about numbers, and I hear a lot of podcasts about numbers and things like that, but I don't think we get really into what motivated or how someone got into this space. I know your story. I don't know all of it, but I know a lot of your story, and you have a unique one, probably the most unique of anybody that I've spoke to thus far, obviously coming from a different country. But the one question that is consistent that I've asked on this podcast since we started was, what is it that you want it to be? Because obviously there are some people that have relatives or parents that were in the real estate space that said, I always knew that I wanted to do real estate. But there's a ton of people, and probably a higher percentage of people that are in CG that wasn't what they wanted to do. So when you were a little Kiwi growing up in New Zealand, what is it that you said, I want to do this?
Yeah, I kind of had a tourney on the brain, to be honest, before I knew how much time and effort would have to, after I got done with my undergrad, I did stay on to get my MBA, but to stay on and get my JD was going to be just a little too much. So, yeah, law in America is very, very different. I kind of just, was thinking law. I enjoyed debate. Debate in high school was something I really enjoyed. And, you see all these TV shows of attorneys kind of running through the counter arguments in a courtroom, and you think that might be pretty cool. But that quickly subsided once I saw the reality of what attorneys do. And I don't know, mate. Honestly, I kind of fell into what I'm doing now, but I think it was an entrepreneurial itch that I just had to scratch. And so I never really said I wanted to do real estate, but I knew it was going to be my retirement vehicle. I knew I did want to invest in real estate. I just didn't think it would be my vocation at the same time. So that was more fortuitous looking back, that when I found this niche of buying houses on the courthouse steps, that I was able to not only do it for others and make money, but I was able to buy and hold and obviously change my life through the wealth building strategies that real estate affords.
So let's earmark that, because we'll get back to that. Because I am interested on how you knew that you wanted to use this as a retirement vehicle, because that's not normal. That most people don't just say, yeah, I'm gonna invest in 401k, whatever comes with my W-2 job. So we're definitely going to earmark that. But I want to go back to how you got to the country. I know the story. Tell everyone how you got to Kansas City, of all places, from New Zealand.
Yeah, I was a pretty good tennis player growing up and was highly ranked in New Zealand. And although the New Zealand Tennis Federation didn't do an amazing job of really, and it's still not, to be honest, they don't do an amazing job of like helping you get recruited. I did have a couple of friends that had come over to America on an NCAA scholarship. And so I was good enough that I, didn't want to give it up, but I was definitely not good enough to turn pro. So I was kind of stuck in that in between, and college was a good in between for me where I was going to be able to get an education out of it. So I just started looking, to America. And the first country you hit when you fly from New Zealand is California. So I started going to UC Berkeley, UCLA, USC, and soon realized that if I didn't have an International Tennis Federation ranking, they were not going to consider me. And I saw that was like the best Americans like fly to the coast. They want to go to Florida and California and New York. And so there was a void effectively in the middle where the best international players were kind of going to Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois. And I started looking around at those kind of schools. And my two big stipulations were, in our family, I wanted to go Division I and go to America. My parents wanted me to go to a big city. I think they were smart enough to say they didn't want me stuck in a small town. Even though New Zealand is a small country, I was raised in Auckland, which had, well over 1 million people. Now it's about 2 million people. And so I was a big city kid, and they thought, rightly, that they wanted me to come to a big city. So long story short, Kansas City offered me a scholarship at the University of Missouri here. And came over and spent 4 wonderful years on the tennis team, and then 1 year as a grad assistant when I was getting my MBA. So I kind of got put on a fast-track MBA program and was out in 5 years, but had a wonderful time, really enjoyed the tennis team and all the travel that afforded me, being able to see America, travel around and be part of a team. I think there's just so many great attributes that team sports can teach young children about, business.
Yeah. I remember as a kid growing up in KCK, I remember the Roos really, really well. Never considered going to UMKC, but had a bunch of friends that went to UMKC. Great downtown arena and lots of history there, and just such a competitive advantage. Something I don't think that for those that do go to college, I didn't go to UMKC, but I did go to Wichita State, as you know. And having a metropolitan university gives so many more advantages. Yes, you get less of that college experience and more of the business side of it. So I think that's a little underrated, honestly, in a college setting, is that metropolitan. Like, you go to UMKC, and you have if you wanted to be an attorney, as you mentioned before, you would have every firm in Kansas City that you would have the opportunity to intern in and potentially go to work for right out of the gates.
Yeah, no doubt. Same thing with accounting. A lot of my friends that did finance went through and got KPMG and Ernst & Young. All the big accounting firms are right there. So yeah, no, it's a great city. Still is. I mean, fortune favors the brave, and I was brave enough at age 8, barely turned 18 in 1 month, and came over to America. I'm now in a position of having an 18-year-old, and crazy to think of sending him halfway around the world and not having him come back. So, that's why when I go home to my mom, the reaction is so palpable, because it's a big deal to have your child fly halfway around the world and not come home. So it's always nice to get back.
Good on your parents for allowing you that option to travel that far. Because as a dad myself, that would be tough. But I can see where I would be like, go for it. And my wife would be, yeah, are you sure you want? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So you got your MBA, 5 years fast track, Division I athlete. What's after that? Do you get into real estate at that particular time? What's next?
No, so my wife, girlfriend at the time, and then we got married just shortly after I graduated from my MBA. But my father-in-law, so her dad, had an advertising company, and I was helping him out. He had a very small business, just one employee as a secretary, and then him. But he'd come up with a really neat idea of putting advertising inside commercial aircraft. And long story short, he asked me to kind of run with it. And so while I was getting my MBA, I was flying to United Airlines and Sun Country Airlines and Vanguard locally, the airline in Kansas City, and all these different airlines, trying to convince them to put advertising inside commercial aircraft. And so it was a really cool water-like effect that this decal effectively on a overhead stowbin door. And we got it up, and then we all know what happened on 9/11 of 2001, and that really brought the whole thing down, from a marketing perspective, because marketing departments were just fired across the board. They had to go into mass revenue conservation because all the airlines were hit so hard. And it was just a really strange time in the world, and we were heavily involved with airlines at that time. So while I was doing all of this MBA work, I got my MBA and was doing this work with Bill in the advertising company. I did answer an advertisement and went down to in October of 2001 to a small kind of a boutique real estate wealth building conference in Springfield, Missouri. And Larry Holder was the guy who put it on. I don't think he's around anymore, but was kind of a guru at the time, and went through this whole boot camp on real estate. The headline of the newspaper article was just learn to become a real estate investor, learn from a millionaire real estate investor. They threw the millionaire word in there. Yeah. And so that was like super appealing. Obviously I was just, enamored with like, how do I go make money? How do I find my way? I'd read up on real estate a lot and found that there were more millionaires made from real estate than anything. And so I was just kind of taking this course, and I went down there with a buddy of mine, and we both went down, took the course. He came back and went to work for someone else, but I came back and said, let me get stuck in here and figure it out. And the one takeaway that I had was how to buy direct on the courthouse steps. And that intrigued me, that there would be this bank foreclosure process, that the banks would kind of cleanse title and take back real estate by going through this foreclosure process, which we don't have in New Zealand. And so I learned it, I studied it, went to the courthouse steps, saw people buying. There were very few, one or two guys. And I thought, maybe I could go do this. And that's where I got into real estate, was through the start of the courthouse steps auctions, and just started buying one or two houses here and there, and kind of went from there.
I knew we would get back to this, so we earmarked this piece, right, the courthouse steps, but you fast forwarded through a lot there. So let's peel back this a little bit. you're in Kansas City and you go to Springfield. For those that don't know, it's a smaller city in Missouri. The capital is a decent size, obviously, city, but you're leaving Kansas City to go down here. You go, you learn, and you take action immediately. Your buddy said, I'm going to go work for someone. You had this entrepreneurial spirit and said, I'm going to do this. I'm very interested. I'm going to learn how to dig in and learn how to do this. But, for those that are listening that are maybe just getting started, to take that next step, most people, I got to have a bunch of money in order to do that. So how were you able to buy at the courthouse steps when you were an MBA student or just graduated, right?
Yeah. So 2 things to take away there. One is that I was the one that I paid $5,000 and you could bring a friend or a spouse, and my wife wanted nothing to do with it. And so she was still reeling from you spent how much? Wait, we don't have $5,000. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be fine. So I took just a buddy of mine, and I think it's a case of, if he had not paid any money, he wasn't invested in the opportunity as much as I was. So he came back and wanted the safety and security, which I respect. I mean, but just different choices for different people. And so he, came back and just went straight into a job and has always looked back and be like, oh man, I'm like, yeah, I get it. But the other part of that is, went down there and, just really, you say take action. I took action, but my action was to study what others were doing to make sure I wouldn't lose money. Didn't have any money, couldn't invest any money, but I would go and follow along at the courthouse steps and kind of paper out as though I was buying myself. Drive by the house, look at it as though I was about to invest, go to the courthouse steps, see that it sold for $40,000 and that I felt like it was a $100,000 asset. Well, that would have papered well. And so then you kind of chase it down. So once I was confident enough that I could do it, then you go to friends and family and say, hey, can I borrow some money? So I did a loan with a short-term loan with my father-in-law, Bill, who gave me $40,000, and then my father, who gave me 40. And then I bought it on the courthouse steps and then did a quick bank refi and then paid them back and just, started moving down that process. So it was, yes, taking action, but very calculated action. There's a good friend of mine, you've met him, Shane Bisson, the chiropractor, that he's like, people always think that you're so reckless because you buy on the courthouse steps, but you're the most calculated, non-risk taking guy that I know. It's kind of that oxymoron of thinking, you're buying sight unseen or you're buying on the courthouse steps, that you must be risk tolerant. And it's actually the exact opposite.
I think the biggest takeaway from what you just gave, and hopefully everybody can take away the same thing. You were taking action, but it was calculated and you did the work up front. You looked at an asset before you bought it. This is what it's going for. This is the value of it. You brought back data that people didn't just have to, they would have probably given you the money because they love you, right? They probably would have given you the money anyway, but you got the money because they love you, and you had the facts to back it up that their investment, it wasn't just going to go in the wind. You actually were going to return the investment with, their initial investment plus interest, right? I mean, you did the work that came with it. People say all the time, you got to take massive action. Well, yes, you do need to take action because a lot of people have analysis paralysis, but there's a great example of taking action and making people feel comfortable with giving you money because you've actually done the research and you know what you're doing, even though you were just starting out.
Yeah, I think there's always, people say they treat their money like their own, but, I think more people should, that the danger in these bigger deals that some people get into now that we're down the road of like syndications and things is not treating the money like your own. I think it's always go back to, would you buy the house? It was just your own cash. And the fact is, yes, I would. I just didn't have any at the time. So yeah, I think that's a big, big lesson is if the deal is there, the money will appear.
Well said. Give me one failure, one challenge that you had early on and how you overcame that.
Only one?
Just one that you can think of.
I think, I'll give you like a non-real estate one almost, in that I think I needed to make sure that my wife was on board with my plan. And, looking back, that wasn't as easy. Like now, I could just come home and say, "Hey, honey, I bought an apartment complex," and she'd be like, "Oh, good for you," and just go about her day. But for her, my wife has a different need for financial security than I do. Her need is greater than mine. I think most males historically is kind of the hunter-gatherer type are ones that just, they're always going to hustle and grind and go out and do whatever it takes. But I think one of the lessons I learned was the need to get on the same page with your spouse or significant other to make sure that they understand that you are taking the appropriate, risk adverse measures to make sure that you can bring this asset to fruition. And that if you are going to go chase that path, and go away from a W-2 position of safety and security, which we can talk about the phallus and fakeness of the security of a W-2 job. But, at that young age, you're still probably thinking safety and security through working for someone else. When you do want to go out on your own, you just need to make sure that you have the support of those that are around you. And I think she was, it was very nervous for her. She wouldn't go back and say, "Oh yeah, I trusted him right from the get-go." She would say, "No, yeah, I had a lot of doubt." But she was, I think, compassionate enough and loved me enough to say, go ahead and jump on in and do what you do.
So if that was the biggest out of the gate, you had to have the support of your wife. Give me that first time where she was like, "All right, I trust him, but now I actually have some dough to show that there's a reason I should trust him." What was the big swing?
It came from a long time later. I was driving to the airport one time. Actually, her and I were about to fly to New Zealand, and so her mom was in the car, which kind of gave me a little pause. And I had one of my friends call me who was working for me at this time down in Florida, and Sarah was only listening to one part of the conversation, and I was like, okay, oh great, oh really, oh cool, thanks. And she's like, "Who was that?" I said, "I was Todd," and she said, "What? And what was that about?" "Oh, we just bought a house in Florida." She's like, "We what?" But I think at that point she knew, okay, we can buy stuff in a different state and everything's going to be just fine. So yeah, that was one where that was a cool story actually. We bought a house, one of the last Chinese drywall houses. So there was an epidemic of Chinese drywall that didn't bode well down in Florida. And when utilities were shut off, it started to kind of ooze the sulfur onto the electrical outlets and it was causing house fires. And we were able to find one that they had gutted and not put back, and we were able to buy it as a shell, and we bought it for $140 when it was $470 on the back end. So,
wow, where was that at?
That was in Bradenton, Florida.
Yeah, just south of here.
Yep.
And what year was that?
That was in, I think, 13.
Okay.
Yep.
So you had been past 2008 and all the 2009, 2010 where people made. So you were couple years after that, where the market was still a little soft in 13 relative to what we see today.
Yeah, no doubt. That was a good time for us to buy in Florida because it was soft enough that we could get deals, but firm enough that we knew they would hit rock bottom and was starting to come back up again. Like I told you, I'm pretty risk averse. I didn't jump into Florida in 2010, 11, 12. It was carnage down there, and stuff was 50% off, which we weren't seeing in Kansas City. We didn't really see the massive downturn that it did in Florida, and so it was a little nerve-wracking. I mean, I'd love to, you can look back now and say what I should have done, but it was pretty nervy, and so I waited a little bit longer and then finally rode it back up once we knew that it was a for sure thing.
So outside of the great advice you gave about making sure that your spouse is on board and the support, it's so important. I don't think that gets talked about enough, is having a supportive spouse, but also making sure that you as the owner are of the business and involved on a day-to-day basis are communicating at a high level with your spouse so they understand what you're going through beyond just your family and all those other things. So you gave some great advice there. What about from the real estate perspective? If, you're, somebody that's, W-2 in it and part-time in it, or someone that is, looking to grow and scale their business, what was the best advice that you would give somebody in that early stages of your career?
Yeah, I think it's a who, not how play. I think who should you get to do the deal? I think too often as a solopreneur, I was probably thinking, how can I go do something? I was smart enough to not try and do any of the handyman work, so I never did any of the rehab. But I think at an early stage, I think if you can think who, not how, getting help on the secretarial side of things, on the admin side, it tends to bog you down. Getting help on your taxes and financing, this can all be done at a fraction of the cost. We're so blessed now with the internet; we can go and find, relatively cheap, quality help. Most of our international team members have college degrees, and we employ people in Mexico and the Philippines and India. It's relatively easy to find quality help to help you on your journey, and doing it fractionally rather than full time with the benefits and healthcare plans and all of that. You don't need to go down that path, but I think it's wise to get as much expert advice and try and get things off of your plate as quickly as possible. And I think I would have, had I to go back, I probably would have done more sooner and tried to scale a business by getting more people involved at a fraction rather than just bringing people on as full-time employees. It really is a stressor to not have to just start worrying about your own paycheck, but that of other people.
It's great advice. Having people that can do things for you, help you scale faster, but also being around like-minded individuals. So this segues nicely right into what year did you hear about CG, Collective Genius, and what was your first reaction? Did you know about masterminds? Had you heard of anything like this in the past?
No, I was totally green to it. I had no idea whatsoever. It's not really something that's done, in different countries. So I had no experience to it prior. Was introduced to it from an existing member who said, "Hey, just give this guy a call." And then I got on the phone with Jason Medley. And Jason, I'll never forget the first phone call I had, because I actually, the same couch that I keep in my office, it was about 10 years ago when I had that first phone call with Jason, and I just kind of lay down on the couch and was just, talking to him on the phone. But I just suddenly felt like he knew the answers to questions that I didn't even know to ask yet. And it was a little bit strange that he wasn't actually a real estate investor, and yet he kind of knew my business so intimately. And he kind of spoke to me as an entrepreneur. So no, it hit me pretty hard, like a ton of bricks, that I needed some help. I did feel like kind of that, just like an entrepreneur on an island with no one to turn to. I felt like in Kansas City, I didn't want to tell anyone what I was doing, because then they may come in and compete. This very narrow-minded, scarcity-minded brain of mine back in the day. And so I was pretty naive to what were the possibilities. I was just kind of I'd found something I could churn out some cash and was doing a good job of it, but I was burning myself out. It was just really late nights. That was back in the day when I'd, have young kids that I'd, put to bed, and then, say goodnight to my wife after dinner, and then go work for another 3 hours while she was sleeping. I could work till, and then, next morning, how late did you say? Oh, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, why? I'm like, well, we needed to know what auctions were coming up the next day. And you just pour so much into the business to get anything off the ground. The old adage that I'd rather work 100 hours for myself than 40 hours for someone else is fairly true. And I was working long, long, long days. And I think it takes a toll, but Jason opened my eyes to say, hey, just come down and kind of meet some other people that are doing what you're doing. And man, it was just, Collective Genius has been life-changing for me. I wouldn't have a business without CG.
So much good in that, that ironic that you sat down on the couch to talk to Jason. Was it a little therapy session there for you out of the gates?
Well, it is. One of the little things people don't know about me, I like to close my eyes when I talk on the phone to people, just kind of get clear head. And so sometimes I always have the couch in here, and sometimes I'll just lay down just to relax. Like your eyes are a muscle, and sometimes they get super tired. So when I am talking on the phone to people, I'll just kind of close my eyes. So yeah, I just remember closing my eyes and having this, it was like a therapy session, just kind of, venting to him, telling him what was going well in my business, what was going wrong. And suddenly, he was sure that he could help, and with such confidence that he could help. And I'd never had anyone tell me that they could help me in the same way before. It was very strange. Maybe it's more commonplace today, and with YouTube and the internet, be offering up advice all the time is probably more of a done thing, but I'd never heard of it. So it was completely new to me, and I had to step out in faith that this would be a good thing.
You mentioned something before when you had young kids, and we get this question often, especially as I'm talking to new investors like you were talking to Jason back then, that say, when should I expect some life balance? And not that they're saying, hey, I need to get out of this immediately. They're just in that grind, right? As they're scaling, maybe they're at, $1 million and they're trying to, they can see that they can get to 2, but to do more right now with what they're doing. And it goes back to the who, not how, right? Mm-hmm. But that balance in your journey, not that it's ever perfect, and there's a season for everything. There's a season for grind. There's a season for vision, all of these things. And you're really good about thinking time. Probably one of the few members that I hear often talking about thinking time. So there's a lot in this question, obviously. But the first part of that is, can you give a little bit of the journey of balance in from beginning to now?
Yeah, well, the bad news is it didn't happen for me quickly at all, because I went through the majority of my career without an integrator, without someone who was an operational expert. And that's one thing that I wish I had have done a lot earlier, although it probably wouldn't have been the same person, because my COO, Chris Johns, was my first ever integrator. And, you can't get someone that talented without a massive paycheck. So I get that it wouldn't have been the same person and probably would have had to go through iterations. But right. Having said that, I did have a couple of secretaries that were meaningful and office managers that were meaningful and took some of the organizational structure out, but I never had a business partner. After I had a big business divorce, which if you want to go down that path, we can talk about that whole debacle. But, once I never, even those were meant to be silent business partners. So I never really had someone that was helping me with the operational day to day. And until you have, I guess the short answer to your question, Leon, is until you have someone that can help you. If you're an entrepreneur, visionary, CEO, real estate maverick, and you will not have work-life balance until you get someone that will handle some of the operational day-to-day for you. And I didn't get that till about 2018. And so it was a strain to go from 2002 to 2018, really kind of grinding it out. You just have to be a different version. You can't be who you are. So now I am great. I mean, I went away I just got back from New Zealand and took an impromptu 10-day trip down there. And although, because I'm an addict, I guess, I did look at email once in a while, I didn't have to. Certainly wasn't asked any questions. Wasn't on the phone for any business meetings or anything. And I come back home and just had a lunch before this call with you today with Chris is our Monday. We have a lunch on Monday, every Monday. And, I said, hey, what do you need from me? And the only answer was just people. He needs he needs more people to fill certain roles. But operationally he doesn't need anything. I mean, he's just running the business in a meaningful way. So, so work-life balance now is wonderful for me. Again, I got to get him some help because he's in a period of scaling now where he actually needs a little bit of operational help. But yeah, it doesn't come quick and it doesn't come easy. And I think part of it is just you've got to understand the business in a meaningful way before you can start replacing yourself in little quadrants. And so that's important. And then you kind of start with the administrative, then the operational, to remove yourself out so you can focus on vision and strategy and revenue.
So that was, I think you said 16 years before you hired that role. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that are in their 3 to 5 years journey at this point of their investment business, and I got to have a COO, got to have an integrator immediately. And it probably is the answer in the near future, and it is what it will hold them potentially back. But obviously, that individual, like a Chris Johns, your COO, one of the best integrators, COO, whatever you want to call that title, that we have within the Collective Genius. He gives as much value every time he's at the meetings that you do or any other member does.
Yeah. Actually, that would be a fun counter interview to have, just as an aside, to have him on here to give his story, because he comes at it from a complete different angle where he's not an entrepreneur. He doesn't want the risk of going out and starting another business, but he comes in here eyes wide open and he sees all these other businesses and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and has great clarity in where we're hitting.
Yeah, well, I will definitely get Mr. Johns on there, because that is, from a perspective of, because anyone that you talk to about, well, man, I can't hire someone in this role because, number one, they're going to cost me a lot, and what's going to keep them from doing this on their own? Well, there are always people out there that do not want the responsibility of entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
It's your job as the entrepreneur to find those individuals and pour into them and take care of them. And they will always, always be loyal. I'm speaking from experience.
Yep.
They will always be loyal if you take care of them, because they don't want the responsibility that you took on many, many years ago and continue, because you have to, at the end of the day, all of those employees, they're your responsibility to make sure that they're taken care of. There's a lot of people out there that don't want that. So tell me that journey. How did you find, I know the story, but that'll be, that's good for people to hear. Like, how did you know he was the one, and how did you get him to come over?
So Chris and I were friends beforehand, which people may say, well, that was, an easy path. I would actually argue that it was more challenging, because our wives are best friends, our daughters are best friends, and he and I are best friends. So, it was a big leap of faith that we had to kind of slowly step into to make sure that we were going to honor our friendships and our wives first and foremost before we would do anything crazy. So it was actually at my wife's behest that she asked that we kind of step in more as a consultant, that he step in as a consultant before an employee, just to make sure that we got along. But yeah, I had him take the PI, had him take the disc, understood that he was an operator first and foremost. There's a book called Traction, which most entrepreneurs have read, but there's a supplemental book to that called Rocket Fuel, which talks about the visionary and the COO, or the visionary and integrator relationship. And that was something that when I read that book, it just really resonated with me, because I'm so off the charts visionary and not an integrator. And so it resonated with me, and I had him read it, and he's like, oh, it resonates with me too, because I'm 100% integrator. So suddenly we're like, okay, maybe this will come together. And actually part of our written work agreement once he came on board was that if all else fails, let's default back to whatever, Rocket Fuel would say. And one of the funny things about the book Rocket Fuel is it does say that if the visionary and the integrator disagree, that the integrator takes precedence and has a trump card on any of the operational decisions. So, that certainly resonated with him. But no, we were friends first and foremost. I reached out to him for sales help because he was a sales manager in corporate America. So he managed people really well. But what I have continued to find over the years is that his strength is in patiently waiting for the right outcome and, some would say manipulate. I shouldn't use that word, but maximizing the potential in everyone that he comes into, that he comes across. He's a great people person, and that's so important in business, is to manage people really effectively and hold them accountable. The irony here is that most people think accountability is a bad word, but accountability is actually the greatest of words. People want to be held accountable. Mm-hmm. Chris McChesney in the 4 Disciplines of Execution talks about you give their employees a winnable game and then just keep score. Because everyone wants to win. If you hire, people that are competitive, they're going to want to come in and win. You just give them a scoreboard and then just say, hey, how are you doing? And so that's what we've continued to try and do. So back to how did we do it? So we had him come on as a consultant. I saw and listened and watched him lead my sales team at the time, and the way that he would hold them accountable, both with humor and with scorecards and metrics. I say humor because he really does a good job. Like if someone were to walk into a room without a pen and pad, he'd have some joke about, oh, so are you wanting me to take your notes for you, or how's this going to work? And oh, should I go get a pen and pad? That'd be a good idea. Yeah, just humor. You can see Chris doing there, like
rather than yelling at them, it's a back and forth.
He's very good with people, manages them well. and gets the most out of them, and quick, and a pretty good gauge of whether people are going to succeed or fail. And so, the onus was, when he came in, he said, "I'm just telling you, you're great, but you don't hold people accountable. When I come in and lay accountability over this organization, just be ready. We'll probably have to turn over 99% of your staff." And sure enough, like, there's no one working here. Well, 2 people that are working here out of 44 that were with us back in the day. So it's a painful process, but worth it, because we just keep getting better and better and better. And so he came on board. He was 4 or 5 months consulting, and then he was getting transferred up to Kansas City. And he came to a couple of CGs with me so he would understand the world that I was living in and what the potential could be. He sat down with a couple of operators that were doing, big business, with Dan Lane, Jeremy Fish as an example, and seeing what could we do if we hit our stride and started doing that. So he saw the potential and came on board. But it had to be a mutual decision. It's a partnership of sorts. I mean, technically he's not an equity partner, but he runs the business entirely, so it's effectively a partnership, and is rewarded on that as well.
How long did you guys know each other before he took this role?
Better part of 8 or 9 years, I think.
It's something that I share, Mark. You may not have heard me say this before, but I was Chris Johns when I entered real estate. I had 11 years of corporate experience, and my first job in real estate was a COO, and I knew that owner for 10 years before, and that person continued to talk to me, tell me that I would be perfect for this role or that role, and going up the corporate ladder. I wasn't ready, but when I was ready, I remembered all those conversations over a few beers here and there, or business meetings or lunches, what have you. You find someone that you feel like is perfect for that role. Even if you don't think you can get them this year or next year, build a relationship, because it just takes that one time in corporate where they change something on you, a comp plan. It's inevitable. It's going to happen in corporate America.
No doubt. And as your kids get older, your kids get older, like when Chris was getting worn out with the travel, because when you climb that corporate ladder, oh, great, here's more territory and bigger paycheck. Here's more territory and a bigger paycheck.
That's right.
With the bigger paycheck comes travel. And when you have young kids, like he's like, I'm so burned out on the travel. It used to be fun and exciting. He always jokes that it was, steaks and brown liquor that would get him through. It was like, that's all he did, was he was on the steaks and brown liquor tour, going around just talking to clients, talking to doctors. Yep. And he just got burned out. He didn't want to travel anymore. He wanted to pour his efforts and energies into another business. And I think, the lesson there for people on my side of the equation is that 90% of the time, the people that you need to hire are already within your circle of influence. And if you just keep your eyes open, there are people that you think you wouldn't be able to attract, but they are probably looking at you thinking, oh, that guy probably would never hire me, but I would really love to work with him. There's, the grass is not necessarily greener, but it's certainly, people are looking with more of an open eye to those kind of opportunities than people would really think.
It's inevitable that people that are, if you're building a corporate type of structure where you're becoming a real estate business owner instead of just a real estate investor, those people that that have been in corporate for a long period of time, I too was tired of travel, and I was traveling from island to island in Hawaii. So that I was done with corporate when I'm going to Maui every week. And it sounds like, paradise, but I was tired of getting on a plane 2-3 times a week going inter-island. And so eventually I just said, I need something where I can actually be in the same market. So I can totally relate to that. One thing I don't want to gloss over, we've seen some presentations recently by Jimmy Vreeland and Eric Brewer on a great book called Dream Manager. And you spoke to it just now, that Chris, and as an entrepreneur, you can do these things too, even if you're not that operational. You said keep score. And I think a lot of times people think accountability is negative because they think it's, I've got it, I'm holding my thumb on someone. But you're holding someone accountable to their dream that they told you is their goals and their dreams. You've got that from them. They welcome that accountability. And that's where I think Chris and you have built this environment of culture of going, look, we want everyone to win. Our goals as a company don't have to be different from your goals. Let's all accomplish them together. And that's been something that we've really been focused on within the community. And it's always been there, but I don't think it's been as defined. And what you just spoke to, that accountability, the scorecard, you can maximize everybody on your team by helping them get what they want.
Yeah, everyone on a team has a one-page strategic plan. And at the top, it starts with the company's priorities, core values, BHAG, 3 to 5 year goals. But then at the bottom is quarterly priorities and individual KPIs. And so they have their name on it. Everyone has one on their desk and is looking at it on a daily basis. And so quarterly, we change that. We give them new priorities. We set them up. And then the dashboard reporting that comes out of that is significant. I think they really appreciate it.
That's next level. That's a business. Like, I know that a lot of people will say, I don't want to work in corporate. And then they start a business. And in order to scale, you have to have systems and processes like a lot of those big companies. You don't have to have, the good news is you can write them your way. But going back, when you came into this group, I know that probably wasn't the case of what you just one-page plans.
No.
So what is it that, like, right out of the gates, that a community, the Collective Genius community, at the time we had one group when you first joined, what did the community give you right out of the gates?
A wake-up call, I think. Initially, I didn't see the possibilities of what real estate was offering. I was just doing one thing and doing it pretty well, but I could no longer do it. So when I say I wouldn't have a business without CG, I truly mean that, because I was buying houses on the courthouse steps. Well, you can't do that anymore. Two things blew away that business. One was auction.com. They came in and took what was fairly hard to get, or at least hard to keep in one succinct place, all of the auctions that were upcoming from different attorneys' websites. Well, auction.com came in and just made it very consumable. It used to be where someone would drive by and see a rundown foreclosure property and wonder, I wonder what's happening there. And I would get the secret inside scoop because I was paying attention to these attorneys' websites, and I would go get the deal. Now it's, you just Google the address, it pulls up on auction.com and says, yeah, there's an auction next week, and everyone shows up. So that was the first thing. Second thing was Wall Street very intentionally coming into Main Street. And so, the presence of these huge real estate funds and trusts that have massive dollars that would come in and buy anything on the courthouse steps to outbid you meant that I no longer had a business. So I suddenly had to figure out, what am I going to do when I grow up? And although I'd had a business running for 15 years on the back of this great acquisition channel, it really wasn't a business that was controlling its own lead volume. And so I had to learn how to generate leads outside of just showing up at an auction and raising your hand. And so now we obviously spend a lot of money every month on marketing and direct-to-seller marketing to make the phone ring, to send people on appointments in the living room, to try and get some level of deal flow through and close on some transactions. So, it has given me a cheat sheet. It's given me a blueprint for success. It's given me a resource and database of investors to call when I say, hey, I'm having a hiring problem, or I'm having a lead problem, or I'm having a sales problem. Like anything that's going on, this community is there to help support, because there's nothing that I'm going through now that someone else hasn't gone through before. So it's just accelerated my learning curve. It's helped me jump over hurdles. And it's been a place for me to give back too. I mean, I don't minimize that it's been fun for me to level up my game and actually give back to others. I think when we went through COVID, and property management is a big part of what we do, I think I helped a lot of people kind of manage the assets and manage their way through when people were not paying rent on time. And we managed successfully to negotiate with our banks to get them to, put us on forbearance agreements effectively for all our investors, where they made either interest-only payments or no payments for a period of 4 or 5 months until we got back on track. So, there's the community itself. It's not about the money. It's made me millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's not even debatable. So it's not about the ROI, because it's infinite. It's about the community of people like-minded that hold me accountable at a pretty high level. and give me a chance as an insurance policy to kind of always know where I stand related to the marketplace.
Well said. You mentioned during COVID that give, and for those that have listened to the podcast, understand that this community is built on go giving, bringing value first, and obviously everything that you need, you shall receive in tenfold. But I remember at that time, it was almost like this black swan event. No one knew what was going to happen. And obviously, we now know, looking back, that real estate continued to appreciate, and there was just this market that anything you bought, you won on. But early on, one of the biggest challenges for those that own properties, especially in, let's call it, states with more favorable renter rights, mostly blue states, there were some issues there. And this is a perfect example of the type of value that you get within this community. You guys not only, you shared all the videos that you sent to your tenants and the letter. You guys sent everyone, you kept your tenants, very informed. And in turn, you gave all of that to this community. And I know I set up the Dropbox folder for it back then. It was just a ton of information. I can't tell you how many people said, "Hey, how do I access that? Because that letter, I just need a copy of that letter." Until you mentioned that, I totally forgot about, that time. It's just those black swan events like that, people, you truly see the value of a group like this, because I know you and Chris stepped up tremendously and helped a lot of people out during that time frame. So I know you've gotten a lot, but you've also given a lot to this community as well, and appreciate it.
No doubt. It was an interesting time because, tenants, everyone was scared to kind of, hold tenants accountable. And we were the opposite. We were kind of coming in, respectfully saying, "Hey, look, we get it. But you can't, this is a huge seismic, event the world is facing, but you have to pay rent. And if you can't pay rent, just let us know. But the biggest thing is you cannot not communicate. So if you need, hey, I need a month of forbearance, no problem. Or if I've lost my job, that's fine. Let us know and we'll put you in a forbearance. We're not going to kick you out, but we do need communication. The only people who will be not looked upon favorably are those that do not communicate at all. And so we would have this massive spreadsheet of people like, "Hey, I lost my job because of COVID, it's shut down, and I'm going to get it back," or "I lost my job, I'm not going to get it back," or, so you kind of go through and work through all these situations. But those that just buried the head in the sand, it's like, get them out,
You understood exactly where your entire portfolio was because you communicated at a high level with them, and in turn, you expected the same.
Yep.
Yeah. What's one thing right now that you're that's working for you that you'd like to give, like, something that within the business or even personally that has worked for you at a high level here in the last 6 to 12 months?
This will catch everyone off guard because it's a kind of a random one. But what first comes to mind is, because I'm a big believer in culture over everything. And the one thing that's helped our culture out the most right now is book club. We have started a book club for all our employees to jump into. Technically, it's optional, although we have a pretty good uptick. We have about 50% of our employees engaged in it.
Awesome.
And we're reading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Ideal Team Player, Black Box Thinking, 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, which is kind of like the 5 love languages, Turn the Ship Around, Uncommon Service, all these. It's effectively what we would read anyway, but we're reading it with our employees and giving them a chance to understand. And so the conversations that come out of that, I enjoy it because I get to interact and see what level my team is thinking on. But at the same time, I know that they get a lot of value because they get some one-on-one time with me that is, group time with me, but they hear my voice very loud and clear of how I think about business, and I think it helps them tremendously. So that's been a big cultural impact is book club. I've enjoyed that, and I think anyone who's trying to engage with their employees, just have them read the same books you're reading and just talk about it. It's a fun time, and it really helps build camaraderie.
Well, and you speak the same language, right? When you're reading a certain book and you reference a piece of that book or a philosophy of that book during a meeting, everyone that's reading that book immediately goes, I know exactly what Mark is talking about. Let's go execute at a higher level because he's specifically speaking to that chapter that we discussed. That's so good, man. We all, I think as entrepreneurs, you have a lot of people that say, what books are you reading? I want to continue to read, but they're not reading necessarily with a team. The best leaders I see within this community have book club or are sharing, the books with their team and not just reading them and gaining that knowledge for themselves.
The one thing that's really strange about, like that balance of work-life balance that you were talking about earlier, at least removing yourself from the day-to-day operations of the business, is that it's actually really weird. Like once you get there, Leon, and I think you recognize, because I know you're, good mates with Jason at the same time that he's also your boss, that you see him struggling with what do I do? You kind of, it's like, and then you kind of jump back in and we tend to muck things up because everything's running so smoothly without us.
That's right.
It's a pretty lonely place to be once you've got your business to the point when it's running without you. I mean, you're not needed anymore. And so this was a way for me to stay connected and to engage with my employees so they would know who I am when I would walk in the door. It's been a big thing for me to kind of stay engaged, but I know they're getting a lot out of it as well.
Well, I think no matter what level you're at within a company, something that I've learned from James Lawrence, who you helped bring to the Collective Genius. For those that don't know, the Iron Cowboy is a keynote speaker. If you haven't seen his documentary on Amazon, check it out. It's phenomenal. 50 Ironmans in 50 days. And then he ran it back with 100 plus. He's got all these Guinness World Record books, and talk about mindset. I've seen him now as a keynote twice, and I took something different from each one. The biggest thing I took away from the most recent one was replacing the darkness with light, because we all get in our own thoughts, whether you're at the top and you're lonely by yourself, or you're at the bottom and you think that this business is not for you, or you've got these dark thoughts in your heads about, this isn't going to work for me, or this deal went bad. What I have found and what is so good about that book club is when you're reading and filling yourself with knowledge in different ways to handle situations, whether it's sales or communication with others, including your family as well as business, it's very hard to let the dark just stay in, because you're replacing the dark thoughts with good thoughts. And especially when we're learning as humans, we're growing, and therefore it's very hard for us to be depressed. James Lawrence talks about, find me a person that's depressed and I'll show you that they're probably sitting in a dark room with their thoughts by themselves. And when you're involved in community at your workplace and getting better, just as a person first and foremost, because if you're reading and you're reading with other like-minded people, you're getting better. It's something that's such a great give. And I wouldn't gloss over that if you're listening to this, getting your people, whether you have a team of 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever the team is, immediately start that process of, even if you're not a big book reader, start it, because everybody will, have some common education and common thoughts and positive stuff, because you're learning at the same time and growing together.
And pouring into your employees. And that's the next thing. I mean, you talked briefly about Dream Manager with Brewer and Vreeland and I. But part of that is understanding your employees and what they're wanting. And a lot of what they're wanting, the good employees are wanting to become better people. And what better way than to pour into them through learning and educating and investing in them as individuals. So yeah, it all kind of comes back to that same philosophy of helping people become, growing leaders in your organization. That's really our main goal now, is to just grow, find good talent, but grow them into the best people they can become.
Yeah. You've mentioned several books. Dream Manager is one of them that we've mentioned several times. Who Not How. Is there any book specific that you would recommend to the audience that's one of your favorites to gift?
So it depends what stage they're in, right? I mean, that's the cool thing about books, is like, it depends where they are. If they're in a dark place right now, read Turn the Ship Around. That's kind of one of our latest. That's a great one, where Lieutenant David Marquette took the worst performing naval submarine and made it the best in 9 months. And it's all about a basic philosophy of accountability. So that's a really good one. I would probably start there. But Five Dysfunctions, anything Patrick Lencioni is so easy to read because they're parables that it's a super easy book to consume. So those are easy ones. If you're starting a book club, I'd kind of start with Five Dysfunctions, Ideal Team Player. These are super easy reads, but amazing concepts that your team will grasp onto.
We've learned a lot about you today, but give me one thing that not many people know about you.
Not many people know. So I'm a Broadway junkie. I love going to Broadway shows, and my parents grew up actively participating in a local glee club, if you will. So they'd put on, Camelot and the Pajama Game and, all these different acts that I would kind of go and sit as a young kid under the age of 8. And I remember kind of growing up in that environment. So, they love taking us to Les Mis and Phantom and the Pajama Game, all of these amazing shows. Recently, my wife and I went to Wicked and Lion King. And so, I love the arts. I think it's undervalued in most people's minds. It truly takes you to a special place. And so we try and support that locally here in Kansas City, which has a thriving art, artistic community that we try and support and be a part of. So, I guess not many people, I don't talk about it much, but that's something everyone sees me as the athlete and always on the field of play, but I do enjoy a good Broadway show as well.
We actually have that in common. I was, before I went down the athletic path, I was in plays from like 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and probably missed a little bit of my calling, quite frankly. But I remember the crossroads, and you might have had this one as well, because I know your brother is an actor in New Zealand and pretty famous, and maybe he didn't have this crossroad that you and I had. But I remember, and you may remember this name, you may not. In Kansas City at the time, there was this all-pro. We weren't really good the Chiefs weren't really good, but they had this all-pro defensive tackle named Bill Moss. And Bill Moss did a football camp every year. And every year, Carlos Carson and Deron Cherry and Lynn Dawson, all these great names from Kansas City Chiefs history, were all there at this camp. And so I wanted to be a wide receiver. Carlos Carson, who was our Pro Bowl receiver, was my camp counselor. So I had this opportunity. We grew up pretty poor, and my mom was like, "You've worked, you've been great this year. I want that for you." And I had auditioned for Fiddler on the Roof, and this is, I don't know, 7th grade, 8th grade, maybe something along those lines. And I got the part. Just happened to be the shows were at the same time as Bill Moss football camp. So needless to say, my acting career stopped. And obviously I wasn't a great football player, but it was my favorite sport growing up, and eventually went into basketball and other things. But that was the crossroads for me. Did you have that? Were you in plays and things like that as a kid?
No. Well, yes, I was in plays, enjoyed it, but never enjoyed it. I was always the athlete, so never had the same crossroads moment. But my brother was certainly at that, where he got the lead role. Not Reptevio like you from Fiddler on the Roof, which is one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, no, he went down that path in a meaningful way and is still heavily involved. But it was a blast, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it's always been something that I've, kind of kept it in my family. It's tough because now, if you don't support them, I think they will subside. I think it's important to always give back in that capacity.
Yeah. I agree. I think all of our communities need arts as well as business, as well as sports and all those things. I don't have a choice. My wife was a dance major, so we have to support support the dance program in Wichita State every year. We have to. That's half my wife's whole family is all artists, so we have to make sure that we continue to support the arts. And I'm with you on that one. Amen on that.
Good thing.
All right, so it's we've learned a lot here. I appreciate your time. If people, want to get in touch with you, what do you got going on that people might want to get in touch with you, and how do they do so if they want to?
Yeah, so we help people. So if there are people listening that maybe don't want to get into real estate, well, they want to get into real estate, but they don't want to, they don't have a business, they just want to invest in real estate. We do have still a community of investors that we support, where we help them build wealth through real estate in kind of that passive atmosphere. So if they went to our company, sbdhousing.com, SBD, my wife's initials. But yeah, SBD Housing is our corporation. If they go to sbdhousing.com, they can reach out to us there for any of our investment offerings. We're currently got new construction duplexes and fourplexes that are coming out of the ground. And we have a couple of funds and syndications that are always available. So that would be one way to get in touch. And then just on Insta or Facebook at Marck de Latour, always happy to connect with like-minded individuals.
And on the CG side, we haven't talked much about it, but you've been on our leadership team, I believe now for 4 years, and recently have become a facilitator at our highest level for CG CEO. We have 4 different levels within this community. CG CEO is our newest. It is our highest level for people doing $10 million and up. Tell us a little bit about, facilitating that group and, what investors in that particular room are getting.
Yeah, I think as a community and leadership team, we realized that there was a certain percentage of the population, albeit a small one inside the CG community, that was just kind of asking different questions. They were going from the operational, how do I get better at lead generation? How do I buy more houses? How do I hire better people? To that next level of, hey, the business is running without me. What's my next? Or, I'm thinking about, this taxation problem. How do I overcome or kind of reduce my tax burden? Or, how do I retain the best talent? What structures do you have in place to retain the best talent or attract the best talent? Or, work compensation plans? Like, as a business owner, you ask yourself different questions than perhaps as an operator of a business. And so although CG Select and CG Premier are both really good with operational excellence, I think CG CEO takes the strategic, the visionary, and the business ownership and management to another level. And it's been awesome to be a part of. Obviously a privilege for me to get to sit in that room and facilitate those discussions. But I think it's important discussions to have where you've got people that truly are operating at that next level and can ask some questions of each other and hold each other accountable. Again, that word, Leon, that keeps coming back in this conversation, right? It's like, we can't get away from it, but it's what we all crave. And I think people that are still, making, $5, $6, $7 million a year, $10 million are still wanting, hey, what's next? Or how do I, how can I get better? Like, this is great, but is there something I should do differently? And so all those questions are better asked in a small group environment. That's what we're facilitating now through CG CEO.
That's it's well said, Mark. I tell people all the time, the collective genius isn't for everybody, but if you're a real estate investor that's looking to grow and scale as a human being beyond just business, this is the community for you. Every week we get to have these conversations with great members and people a part of our leadership team. Mark, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you as a friend. As a colleague, as someone that truly does care about this community as much as anybody, including the people that, like Jason and myself, that live it on a daily basis. So thank you for your time. Obviously, if you are someone that wants to be in a room with someone like Mark or any of our other members that have been a part of this podcast, please do us a favor. Go over to collectivegenius.com. On that site, you'll see our many different levels, and you'll be able to apply there, and we'll see if you're the right fit for this community, and vice versa. We obviously want to make sure that we're the right fit for you as well. And obviously, if you like this podcast, be sure to tell your friends, like, subscribe, do all those things that you do on podcasts that all the young kids talk about these days. And continue to listen. It's something that we take very seriously. We want to make sure that we're always giving value, not only in this community, but also on this podcast. Again, Mark, thank you for your time, my friend. It's much appreciated. And look forward to our conversation next week. See you then.
Thanks, Leon.
Are you ready to scale your real estate business? Visit thecollectivegenius.com, where real estate investors come to scale. Subscribe to the Collective Genius podcast and hit the bell icon to be notified when our next episode releases. And thanks for listening.